silver is going to go past $50 an ounce. That's inevitable. That's a question of when, not if. And right now it seems like it's going to happen very soon. There are kind of three elements that I want to talk about today that lead me to believe it could happen this year, probably within the next 6 months, because what we're seeing here is like abnormal activity in the silver, futures market, in the ETFs, and in the physical delivery of silver. That's just suggesting, one, there's a tremendous demand for silver. Two, there's not enough supply. And three, there are people who really want silver, really want the price of silver to go down, trying to make that happen, but it's just not happening. So we're going to get into all three of those kind of reasons why the price of silver could go over $50 an ounce. And I chose $50 because it's kind of like a historical price marker in silver. In the 1980s, I think with the Hunt brothers, silver went up to $50 an ounce, briefly touched it. And then not for another 30 years, in 2011, silver passed $50 an ounce. So 50 is like a symbolic price, and that's kind of why I chose it. But it could go a lot higher. So let me get into those three reasons why it's going to happen. Like I said, I think it's a when, not an if question. So number one is the famous gold to silver ratio. What this is it's basically you take the price of an ounce of gold and divide it by the price of an ounce of silver. And in ancient times, it was kind of fixed at around 12 to 1 or 15 to 1. And the last century, in the 20th century, it fluctuated, but it was usually in this trading band you can see on the chart of between 50 to 1 and 80 to 1. And whenever silver goes to like past 80, to like 90 to 1 or to 100 to 1, what usually follows is a huge move up in silver, just a spike of, price action where people are buying more and more silver. And it's kind of like a reset, right? Like you trade between 50 and 80 to 1. And when you go outside those bands, silver is either, expensive or inexpensive. And when it goes past 80, it's inexpensive and people start buying, and that brings it back within the bands. And right now we are at 90 to 1 and rising. So if you take, the average between 50 and 80 and you get 65, assume gold stays at around 3,000, which is not realistic, but let's just say it hovers around 3,000. Divide by 65, what you get is $46 an ounce silver, much higher than our current levels and a big price jump. But if silver is to return to the mean, to come back in between that 50 and 80 to 1 range, then it's not unrealistic to expect it to go to around $46. And it will likely go higher because when silver moves up, it moves up violently. I think, it's an elevator rather than an escalator, as I forget who said that. So that's one reason. The silver to gold ratio return to the mean. That is one reason the price of silver could go up. The second reason is a very popular one, and that's this short squeeze potential in silver. I don't know, who first identified it, but basically there's this chart of PSLV that I'm showing. And PSLV, for those who don't know, is a silver ETF that is a closed-end fund, meaning they have to actually physically own the silver. If you look at their prospectus, they own the silver and it's in a bank in Canada and it's fully allocated, meaning you could redeem silver. Let's say you owned, 100,000 ounces of silver through the ETF, you could redeem that and take physical possession. So a bunch of people, or maybe not a bunch of people, but some people have shorted this ETF. They've borrowed the shares and they've sold it. And they did that in the last few months, kind of January, February. So assuming it's kind of around that high 20s, low 30s price, they've sold that and they will eventually have to buy those shares back. So when you borrow something, you gotta you gotta return it, and you return and when you borrow, you also pay interest on that. So right now there's a cost to place that trade, a cost. I think they call it the cost of carry or something. But let's say you borrow $1 million worth of the PSLV, and maybe they charge you like 5% or whatever to make that trade. So this trade can't go on forever. It costs the person who made the trade money. Now, let's say you borrowed at $30 an ounce silver and the price goes to, you know, $40 an ounce. Well, now you've got to go back and buy PSLV at $40 an ounce, which is going to cost you a lot. So these are super risky. Anytime you short, it's a risky business, especially, a commodity that can move up violently. But for some reason, there's a bunch of short activity in silver right now in this specific to PSLV, not in SLV, which is kind of a paper ETF. No, specific to the physical ETF. I call it physical, like the ETF that holds silver physically, specific to that. So basically, that's price suppression because all this short position is just selling. It's selling. People are borrowing shares and selling them, but you have not seen the price drop in the charts. Price has actually gone up. So that is what leads people to believe there will be a short squeeze. So if there is a short squeeze, let's say, I think it was about 24 million shares were borrowed. Well, 24 million shares have to be bought back. That's kind of like your floor, your base, where someone has to buy back 24 million shares of PSLV, and that's buying demand. And if it all happens around the same time, you're going to see silver go way past 50 because just as that chart is, crazy upside and short selling, you would see a crazy upside in buying and purchasing would hike the price up. So that's another reason I think we could get the price of silver going past the symbolic $50 an ounce. The other reason is just this lack of supply. You've seen this article, Korean banks are canceling or not letting people buy silver anymore because they're out. And what happens when a business, is out of stock? Well, they restock or they jack up their price, or they restock and move their price up. That's what normal businesses do because they know they can make more money and there's a demand for their good or service. Well, in this case, there's a demand for the good or service, but there's no supply. So that means the price has to move up. In addition to that, you've got the Russian central bank late last year announcing that they are going to be purchasing silver. Anytime central banks kind of buy precious metals, whether it be gold or silver, you've got to wonder why. Why do they want to hold precious metals that don't earn any interest rather than their own, bonds, their own currency? That's got to tell you something about how they feel about their own currencies, which in turn will affect the price of the precious metals because those are priced in the currency. So like, the Russians, let's say you've got, 1 ounce of silver and however many rubles, call it 100 rubles per an ounce of silver. They would rather, hold the silver, 1 ounce of silver than the 100 rubles. That's not confidence in your currency because you could, maybe go buy a Russian bond that is, worth 100 rubles and pays whatever, 5% interest. So they'd rather have, assets on their books, 1 ounce of silver than, 100 rubles worth of bonds. That's telling us that there is a strong demand for silver, and it's only going to keep growing. Now, I think those are kind of my 3 points of why silver could go up. There was this other thing, this article, not really an article, but an announcement from the COMEX or the CME group that basically says this silver's futures contract is no longer available. And why that's happening is they don't want people to, be buying silver using futures and taking physical delivery, because as we know, it's way better to hold physical silver than it is to own ETF silver or paper silver. They don't want people doing that, so they've delisted this product. And you see in this chart the flows of silver out of London and into the US. That's the flow of physical silver. People in the US, where there's usually a lot of investment demand, but also industrial demand for silver, but more, investment demand, people want that. Could it be because of the tariffs? They're worried about, buying foreign silver and that going up. Very possibly. People could fear tariffs and, you know, getting this sort of tax on silver, and they want to hold it within the US, within their own borders, within their own home. That's a very real demand for silver. So all three of these reasons kind of converge together and make me think that the price is going a lot higher. I want to know what you think. How high do you think the price of silver could go? Let me know what price, your average price you bought it at. Are you taking, coins? Are you, getting bars? Are you buying the PSLV? Or if you think, the price of silver is going to go down, let me know that as well in the comments. Like the video and subscribe so that, you can get more news and information about these very, very interesting markets. And thanks for watching.